And this personalization was a big aha moment for me. I then started to help my mother, who was arthritic and couldn't get out of bed, like literally bedridden, and she now goes to the gym with a trainer, right? I started to work with my niece, who had such debilitating anxiety because of her hormones that she was not going to school. She just stopped. And now she's like a flourishing straight A student, right? So so that pushed me and propelled me to everybody needs this. I'm going to build this. I personally funded the research, and here we are a few years later, working with clinics all over the world.
Hello, and welcome to Discovering True Health, your weekly deep dive into health and wellness. Thank you so much for joining us today. So today we're going to dive into the fascinating world of personalized medicine using DNA testing. We're going to be exploring the latest breakthroughs and insights in functional genomic testing and its potential to revolutionize healthcare, prevent chronic disease, and improve longevity. We're also going to be discussing how this type of testing goes beyond our health by helping us improve our love relationships, choosing an optimal career, and even improving our parenting. Joining me today is Kashif Khan, founder of the DNA Company. He's also author of The DNA Way, a two-time TEDx speaker, and host of the Unpilled podcast. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Pleasure. Good to be here.
Now, getting into the world of personalized medicine and genomic testing was a career pivot for you. Can you first share with us your personal health journey, what you learned along the way, and what sparked your passion to create your company and this type of testing?
For sure. If you had asked me a couple of years or even a few months before starting the company if I would be doing this, I'd say there's no way, no possibility, nowhere near the industry. So I actually got sick. And this is the story for a lot of sort of functional medicine, root cause healing type innovation. It's usually somebody who's stuck, that can't find an answer, and they have to answer the question themselves. And they're like, why doesn't everybody know what I just figured out? Right. And that's what happened to me. I had 5 chronic conditions. I was 38 years old, this was a few years ago. And I couldn't get the answer as to why. That's the question I asked. Like, why all of a sudden do I have gut issues, depression, psoriasis, migraines? Like, I can't function. What did I do wrong? What did I eat wrong? What did I breathe wrong? And the answer was like, we don't do that here, right? We tell you what it's called and we tell you what pill to take.
Right.
So that shocked me. I started to dig into my own biology, um, and I started to learn that there was parts of my genetic code that weren't functioning properly. And I myself unraveled this mystery of connection between my gut and my brain, my detox system, some inflammatory pathways that just didn't work. And so if they didn't work, the same food or exposures that weren't a problem for my business partner sitting right next to me who wasn't sick were a problem for me. And this personalization was a big aha moment for me. I then started to help my mother, who was arthritic and couldn't get out of bed, like literally bedridden, and she now goes to the gym with a trainer, right? I started to work with my niece, who had such debilitating anxiety because of her hormones that she was not going to school. She just stopped. And now she's like a flourishing straight A student, right? So that pushed me and propelled me to everybody needs this. I'm going to build this. I personally funded the research, and here we are a few years later, working with clinics all over the world.
Beautiful. Yeah, I agree. I feel like most people that end up in functional medicine is definitely this moment where they hit a wall themselves in health and figure it out. It's so true. That's why I'm here on this show.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned in some of your work that when you did do all this testing, you tested your biological age and you found some interesting things around that and were able to kind of reverse it or slow it down. Can you kind of explain that and what the difference
Yeah.
between biological age is and some of the things you did to slow it down or reverse it?
So at that time, I didn't even know it was possible to determine how old you are on the inside, right? As I started to learn the tools that were helping me, I found the ability, and there's multi modalities that will get you there, and I kind of did all of them. One is, how is your DNA expressing? How efficiently is your body responding to environmental cues and giving you exactly what you need? If a lion's running towards you, do you get the adrenaline ability to run or not? Right? Your genes expressing and giving you what you need. The other is there's methylation markers, which speak to how efficiently your body's converting various nutrients and doing all these multitude of jobs. Then there's cardiac age in terms of the actual elasticity of the arteries, which you can measure through pulse, the actual buildup of plaque. So I went through all these things and I learned that at that age of 38, when I started this journey, I was biologically 43. No surprise given how sick I was, right? I now actually am 43, by the way, and I'm now biologically 33. And this is proven empirically measured because I, first of all, acutely fixed the problem. Then I started to value health as really recreation for me. It became my passion. And then I got into optimization territory. How far can I take this? Right. And so that's where I'm at now. I know how my body works. I know exactly what to do every day, depending on how I'm feeling. And to give you a specific example, because you asked, like, what are some of the things I did? There's a gene called GSTM1, which is a primary detoxifier of the gut. And we don't even think about that we need this. So when you eat foods, the plastics, chemicals, pesticides, molds, everything that's coming along with it, you're meant to prevent those things from entering your bloodstream. Filter them out. This is why we pee and poop and sweat. You remove toxins from your body. I don't have that gene in my gut. So it's not even about what version or what variant, it literally missing from my genetic code. Don't do this job at all. So when I was working, in the city, eating lunches outside and packaged foods and all these things, it had a very different outcome for me. And so the level of inflammation that I was suffering from this constant threat of those toxins in my vasculature, in my blood, wreaking havoc all over my body, toned it down, reversed it, but then also got better at knowing how to detox, how to support my gut, how to make up for my broken biology. That's one of many things, but that I would say is a major contributor to how I feel today.
Wow. So we could have a missing part, like you said, of our genome or something broken, and we can take that information and kind of take action to assist the body to kind of overcome that missing part of us.
Exactly. So you feel the way you feel, whether it's good or bad, but you don't know why. You
Right.
don't know what biology led you to this net outcome. So if you work based on the way you feel, all you're doing is masking a symptom, which is many years after the problem started. Your body will fight, it's resilient, it will keep pushing back and repairing, and it's regenerative in nature, it will fix things. But eventually the body loses if you keep exposing yourself to the wrong thing. And so, yeah, so that is the truth that there are parts of our biology that are broken. And if you focus there, it doesn't really matter what the symptoms are. They get resolved on their own because the inflammation is gone. If you look at North American data, the top 15 killers, 14 of them are all rooted in inflammation, right? So cardiovascular disease, cancer, dementia, all these things. If you don't have inflammation, these diseases can't happen. It's really that simple. And so why we have inflammation, that's what's highly variable between us, that our sort of broken biology and what would cause us to get sick.
Right. And you talk about how this type of testing, the DNA testing can actually find those issues within what you have missing, and it can actually help prevent or mitigate these types of chronic illnesses.
Yeah. So now all of a sudden you can pinpoint which part of your human genome isn't. So first of all, what is a gene? A gene is an instruction that tells your cells what to do. You have 50 trillion cells that make up your body. They're all constantly reading this instruction manual to know how to do their jobs. The heart cells read the heart section. The kidney cells read the kidney section. And that's why they become what they are and do what they do. There's some cells that read all the sections and do a lot of different jobs, right? So now if you understand what the instruction is and you're able to actually read the manual and you know how efficiently you do the job, then you know where to prioritize and focus. And this is why so many women are stuck, because we completely ignore the hormone cascade and the difference in all medical research being done on Western European white males is somehow supposed to work on women who have a circadian rhythm around their menstrual cycle. And where men make hormones every day, women do it over a period of a month. How can you possibly take that data and apply it to a woman? And so by understanding your DNA, you're very uniquely able to understand your hormone profile and how you do these things, how you make testosterone, how you make estrogen. Is it toxic in nature? Do you not detoxify it properly? There's a lot of dials that need to be turned in your that cascade of hormones. You can pinpoint the exact part that's broken and fix that, as opposed to masking the symptom and then everything gets better.
Right. And that kind of leads into, can you explain kind of how what you do and what your company does, kind of an overview, and how that's a different approach to what our kind of mainstream healthcare sick care system does for
Yeah.
us?
So there's, the test on its own, which allows people to sort of read about their biology. And from mood and behavior, all of the chemicals that allow you to feel the way you feel, from depression, anxiety, happy, joy, addictive tendencies, reward seek entrepreneurialism, all of that stuff is determined by the neurochemicals of your brain, that it's kind of a neural map in your personality. I can tell you that if I have your DNA, I don't need to speak to you ever prior to tell you your personality to a T. I can explain to you exactly how you behave, what bothers you, what makes you happy, what motivates you, how you work. All of it is driven by your DNA, right? So now knowing that and knowing who you are makes life a lot easier, right? So so that's one. Then there's sleep, the massive problem. More than 60% of people don't sleep properly now. So how do you actually fix that? It's not as simple as, hey, take this supplement to fall asleep. No, there's different reasons genetically why people don't get either high quality sleep, or they don't fall asleep on time, or they sleep through the night but they still wake up like not rested. Those are all different problems, right? So each one of them can be fixed. Diet and nutrition. Should I be vegan? Should I be keto? Do carbs matter? What micronutrients do I not metabolize properly? Do I need more vitamin D, and how often? And all of those components and decisions we make completely through trial and error, as opposed to understanding metabolically how your body actually deals with each of these nutrients to know exactly how much you need. Imagine how you would feel if you knew how much you need, right? Then there's hormones, which is a major area that is underserved, especially in women, like we said. That entire cascade of how you make them and how you clear them, and what that does to your body type, to fat, to muscle, to endometriosis, infertility, menopause, menstrual cycle, libido, hair, skin, all of that stuff is driven by hormones. And the last two are everything around chronic disease and aging. So, why would a disease happen and how do you prevent it? Right? Cardiovascular disease, dementia, diabetes, all the big ones. How do you make sure that what's written in your future just doesn't happen? Right? Mom and dad both had cancer. I'm not going to have it because I know why they got it now, right? The root cause. And the last one is everything around innate cellular health, which is really the most important thing. If the cells are thriving and happy like they were when you were 5 years old, you're not getting a chronic disease. Why don't 10-year-olds have, breast cancer? Or, obviously they don't have puberty yet, but why don't they have cardiovascular disease, let's say, right? Because they're still resilient. The cells are thriving. They haven't been burdened by life yet. So how do you get back to that? Detoxification, anti-inflammatory, antioxidation, methylation. These are all the key systems that need to be optimal to keep you optimal. So if you go through all of that and you truly understand all of that, it's very hard to not be in your ideal health state, to not reverse your biological age, to not feel incredible, to not sleep well and have amazing libido and everything that we want, right? It's you're dealing with the root, and so these symptoms just don't settle in.
Right. Yeah, it really sounds like a major key. I mean, so far I've done with a functional medicine or functional medicine doctor, we did my food sensitivity testing. So that's the one kind of piece that after I had COVID and was a long hauler for about 2 years and was suffering with that and the inflammation, that made a huge change. I can't even imagine after this testing what a difference in health and longevity and all that would be.
Massive change. And the things that I talked about are what the FDA allows us to tell a consumer,
Mm,
but there's also a lot more we know that we're not allowed to say,
right.
right? The clinical in nature. So for that purpose, we've also set up clinical support, meaning if somebody does have, God forbid, breast cancer or Alzheimer's or crazy psoriasis and they're stuck. So we do have a clinical team that's been trained on functional genomics. We also train other clinicians. A lot of clinicians come to us asking for help. I also personally work on patients that are really stuck. When it comes to things like autism and breast cancer and female hormone issues, those are two areas where I personally get involved a lot, just because I know it's so easy to fix if you get it, and people are so stuck and being given the wrong answer. So I dive in there personally on those ones. But yeah, there's this need for the clinical world to be able to use this tool also, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that support is so important. And I'm sure when you get your test results, you're going to need somebody to help you walk it through it. Now, you were talking about all the different ways, kind of what this test breaks down for us. And many of us in health and wellness, we get into the prevention and we use supplements as part of our strategy. How can our gene expression affect our vitamin and nutrient needs?
So let's take vitamin D, for example. You have 22,000 genes that make up your genome, and 2,000 of them require the right amount of vitamin D, so not too much, not too little, to express properly and do their jobs. Very important micronutrient. 10% of your biochemistry is dependent on this one thing, right? So the way we deal with vitamin D is different. Some people feel the winter blues. They don't feel good at Christmas time. It's not Christmas, it's lack of vitamin D, right? So I can explain that. So there's three steps to the metabolic pathway, and we've identified the three genes that do these jobs. Step one is you need to take D2 from the sun and convert it into the activated D3 form, which your body can actually use. There's a gene called CYP2R1 that does that job. And if you don't have a good version of that gene, you're not actively metabolizing enough. And so your vitamin D levels are going to be low. There's a second gene called GC or VDBP, it has two names, that then transports the vitamin D that you just activated to bring it to the cell where you actually need it. It's in your blood, let's get it to the cells, right? There's a third gene called VDR, which is a receptor that then binds and collects the vitamin D and gets it into the cell. So why is it so complicated? Because our ancestors, remember, our DNA is old. We haven't changed in tens of thousands of years. We're the same genetically. So for the majority of those tens of thousands of years, everybody was outside all the time.
I was going to say our environment certainly has
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
technology, pesticides.
That's the big thing is our environment has changed. We are now indoors 90% of the time with genetic code trying to mitigate the overdosing of vitamin D from being outside so long. That's why we have these three steps.
Wow.
And so we find so many people either don't metabolize properly, or they don't transport properly, they don't bind properly, or maybe all three. So the recommendation is different. If somebody transports and binds well, then but they don't metabolize well, they just need a higher dose. First thing in the morning, take a high dose. If somebody metabolizes well or not, but they don't transport and bind properly, they need multiple doses.
Okay.
Because if they take one shot of vitamin D in the morning, but they don't transport and bind it, they're not actually getting it to the cell. They need to take it, mock the sunlight, which I'm getting it all day, right? So we can be very precise on dosage, frequency, so that the body gets exactly what it was designed and assuming that it's getting. We're putting you back in your ancestral context so you can thrive.
Wow. So it sounds like the standard blood work isn't giving you enough of the picture. I mean, it could say, oh, you're low in vitamin D. Because I know when I, tested after COVID, my vitamin D was just flatlined.
Yeah.
So that could be like, oh, great, take some vitamin D. But like you said, there's this 3-step process. So I could have been taking it the wrong way and still not be
Yep.
absorbing it, or one of the steps in the process was off.
Blood work will tell you how much is in your blood, but you don't know why. If
Right.
you have a low level, is it maybe because you're actually transporting and binding really efficiently? So you're using your vitamin D. So you don't actually have a vitamin D problem, right? If you have a high level, is it because you're not transporting and binding and it's sitting there and your doctor says you have enough vitamin D, but did it get to the cell? So we have to look at all these nuances. That's why it's biology first. How does the body work?
Yeah.
We already know that. Now, what genes drive each step in this biology? That's the thing we didn't know. Now that we do know, we can use that as a tool to make sure that we make the right choices.
Oh, absolutely. Now, with that said, and everything needs to be personalized, is there, from your research, because your company has researched thousands of people and done a lot of work, is there kind of a core list of supplements that have surfaced in your work that are kind of standard that you've seen most people need?
Yeah. I would say the things that almost everybody needs is vitamin D, vitamin C, because it does so much more than what we think. It's not just cold and flu season, it's a potent antioxidant. Everybody seems to need more zinc. Everybody needs more minerals because our soil has been so heavily sprayed and depleted from glyphosates and chemicals and Roundup and all this stuff that we're not, the soil's dead.
Yeah.
So the food looks like a pepper or a carrot, but does it actually give you the nutrients that a carrot or pepper was supposed to provide? And for the most part, the answer is no. And so you're not getting the minerals because the soil doesn't have minerals anymore. It's dead. So most people need to add minerals. And you can do that through various actual of straight minerals or through sea moss or through spirulina and chlorella. There's different ways to get your minerals, right? The other big one, cardiovascular is the number one killer.
Yeah.
Still today. And what we've learned genetically, people don't have bad cardiovascular genetics. Oh, cardiovascular disease runs in my family. That's not actually what's going on. The actual arteries, the heart doesn't usually get sick. It's the arteries that get calcified, cholesterolemia, inflamed, blockages. So we can determine genetically the quality of your artery, the actual hardware. How resilient is it? How prone is it to inflammation? And if you have the not so good quality, which by the way, many of us do, which is why there's so much cardiovascular disease, you will get more inflammation. And your body will respond to inflammation here in this location by sending cholesterol to reduce the inflammation. That's why you get cholesterolemia, because you get inflammation first, bad detox system, bad hardware, cholesterol being used as a tool like a Vaseline to smooth things out. The cholesterol meets the toxin that caused the inflammation, and it also gets oxidized and damaged. And then it starts to build up and build up and build up and build up. And then eventually a doctor says you have cholesterolemia.
Right.
What you really had is an overexposure to toxins that cause inflammation to bad hardware. So, to answer your question about supplements, this is why we also tell people, for the most part, to take nitric oxide supplements. It really helps with blood flow and nutrient delivery. We also tell people to take high quality omega 3s because it helps with the buildup of the hardware, right? Um, and those are some of the key ones. I would say most women need supplementation around their hormone cascades, especially given that there's so much hormone disruption in our environment now.
Yeah.
You can't sit anywhere where you're not breathing or touching something that is not disrupting your hormones.
Yep.
Right?
Bromide
Chemical
is everywhere.
it's everywhere. Yeah. It's in your
Fluoride.
clothing. It's like literally everywhere, right? So most women need supplementation around hormone support. So to reduce the estrogen levels, to clear the toxins. And that's the last thing I would say that kind of everybody needs is to support your glutathione pathway, your detox, removal of toxins, heavy metals. But what you need is dependent on your genes. So if you have a good glutathione genetic system, you can take glutathione. If you don't, you need to take other things like NAC, glycine, selenium. They're sort of precursors to glutathione because you don't have good genetic instruction on what your body should do with the glutathione, so it doesn't work. So those are the key things I would say that most people kind of need.
But it needs to be dialed in and pinpointed to
Yes.
how your actual body is functioning. And does this pertain to, I know we all want to avoid pharmaceuticals, but does this kind of specialization with our DNA pertain to what types of pharmaceuticals work and don't work for
Yeah,
person?
there's a whole other layer of testing called pharmacogenomics, which is we know of the many thousands of the most common drugs, which gene metabolizes each one of them. So now suppose number one prescribed drug, statin, right? Cholesterol pill. How many people get on a statin and then they end up with myopathy, muscle pain, headaches, and they have to quit? And they're like, oh, statins don't sort of meet your or don't match your genetics. There's a single gene that metabolizes. So if you have the slow version of that gene, then the statin lasts a little too long and causes those issues. If you have the fast version of the gene, you're not getting enough benefit of the statin. So yes, there's something to be said about pharmacogenetics. And in that area, we actually work with companies, employers, organizations where it's actually can be done through their insurance also. Um, but just that one particular area can be done there.
Yeah, so important. I know it happened with my father with cancer. He was on a medication, and I guess the insurance companies don't allow you to always test until after it doesn't work for you. And then like, oh,
Yeah.
let's test you after the fact.
Yeah,
Wait,
it's a big challenge, especially for mental health issues. It's a big challenge.
yeah. No, we're bombarded with many different diets and options, on podcasts. Some people say a vegan diet cured them from cancer. Some say, meat-based
Yeah.
diet has helped heal their chronic illness. Can you kind of talk about the role our genes play in this, and why one size fits all doesn't work, why something works tremendously for one person and another one maybe doesn't?
So there is an answer there, but first of all, I'll tell you that when you hear these stories of I went on the vegan diet, I felt amazing. I went carnivore, I felt amazing. Normally, the other half of that story that you're not hearing is I also eliminated all the junk that I used to eat, right?
The
And the
process.
source, yeah. So when you're going carnivore and you're eating grass-fed organic beef and organs, yes, it's potent in its nutrient delivery, but you also aren't eating the chips and cookies and bread anymore, right? When you're going vegan, often people that do that are health focused, and so their choices around what they eat are very careful, right? And so they're not eating the garbage anymore. That's a major contributor why people feel so good, because they cut out the nonsense.
Chemicals,
That
yeah.
being said, we can use your genetics to determine what choice to make. Some people don't do well as a vegan. In fact, I should tell you, more people do poorly than do well. There's genes around the enzymes that you need to break down your plant proteins, beans, lentils, legumes, and most people aren't doing well there. And so if you're not getting your proteins, how are you going to live long and healthy, right? And when it comes to things like keto, carnivore, there's genes around the metabolism and utilization of fat as fuel. And if you're not doing well there, you might feel good in the first few weeks because you get into ketosis and it's a good place to be. You burn fat as fuel. But 5, 6 weeks into it, it's brain fog, low energy, hormones imbalanced because you're not using fat as fuel. But if you do use fat as fuel, well, go ahead, be a carnivore, be a keto. You'll feel great. Same thing with starches and carbs. I've done a bunch of work with the U.S. female Olympic team. So we very specifically have done some research with Olympic female Olympians. There's a lot more injury and there's a lot more variability in outcome. I train exactly the same. Why do I not have the same body? Right? Those type because of hormones. And so we did a lot of work there. Um, and what we found, there was this one particular lady who was a bodybuilder who went on a low carb diet to cut herself and burn fat, and she felt horrible.
Mm.
And when we showed her in her genetics, she's actually a really hyper efficient carb metabolizer. She uses it as fuel really, really well. And her insulin response is excellent genetically. So, yes, don't eat your sugars and pasta, but don't cut out the carbs. And she started to thrive after that. And all of a sudden, she started winning again. So yeah, we can be hyper personal when it comes to diet and nutrition. And I would say, if you're going to make a major change, uh, pay attention 3, 4 weeks into it. If it's not working anymore, it's probably not aligned to your genetics.
Wow. This really takes the guesswork out of it, because I've done a lot of trial and error and tried
Yeah,
higher meat and less carbs, and I don't feel well. I have to have my carbs.
yeah,
And veggies are great, but not too many, not to replace meat. I need
yeah.
kind of more of a balanced diet. Now, this is the same with physical exercise and lifestyle habits, which I thought was fascinating. So, we're all told we should do our cardio and,
Yeah.
train more, a lot more cardio than others. What are some important factors we need to know around that?
So I'm in Toronto, which is a sort of mecca for NHL hockey training.
Oh,
So we
yeah.
work with a lot of NHL hockey players. And there's one particular guy who was meant to be the star player, and in his rookie season wasn't doing so well. And when we got talking, he's like, I don't get it. When we go out drinking, which they have to do as part of hockey culture, I just don't recover. These guys are on the ice the next day, I'm dead. And also, when they did their training, he needed naps, couldn't function the next day. He didn't need a lot more recovery time. So we looked at a couple things, his detox pathways around removing the alcohol, which wasn't doing well, and we showed him what was wrong. But more importantly, there's a gene called SOD2, SOD2, which determines the efficiency of your mitochondrial function, and he had the worst possible genetics there. There's another gene called GPX, which is hydrogen peroxide synthesis, which is part and parcel of this mitochondrial cascade. He also was not doing well there. So his mitochondria, which is the energy source of the cell that causes your cells to make energy but also have energy was not functioning, and so he couldn't recover from that. He was not designed for high intensity cardiovascular activity. And when you looked at his hormones, he looked like he was designed to be more of a weightlifter, strength man, big ball, bulky muscle man.
Right.
And so we had to shift his training around, and we also had to add certain supplementation to help him recover. So kind of a two-way street. Let's support the broken biology with supplements that kind of do the job for you. And let's also remove a little bit of the threat so you're not taking the beating from the thing that you're not aligned with. And all of a sudden, this guy started to thrive and he started feeling incredible. You know, that question of I heard a podcast, I watched a YouTube video, I'm gonna go do what that guy does because he looks amazing. Okay, ask that person, that man, that lady, their story. They can tell you 5 years of failure before they got to that thing, right? And that's why they're like a loudspeaker talking about it, because they're so like wowed by their outcome. But why did the other 5 or 6 things fail them? You know, trial and error is, yeah, it will eventually work, but it's a lot of time to invest into something where you could just get to the right answer immediately.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I was reading about how, some a lot of cardio can be actually bad for some people. That was
Yeah.
really shocking. I've never heard that before. And it's so important to know that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Now, you talked about another kind of aspect of the testing is anxiety, depression. How does our kind of gene expression also play into emotional intelligence, trauma, and PTSD? What do we need to know about that kind of?
So the neurochemicals of the brain drive your unique perception of the world. You truly believe that you're seeing and feeling what you're feeling, and somebody right next to you truly believes something else, and you're both right. You know, and what's going on? So you talk about trauma. There's a gene called ADRA2B, which determines the efficiency of your noradrenaline response. So when you have that impactful adrenaline rush moment, are you more likely to recall the emotional aspect of it or not? Do you tattoo an imprint in your memory, the feeling that was felt during that time or not? And some people do this to an extreme. So when there's, God forbid, a fight or a car accident or whatever, there's some people that jump in an Uber and drive home. There's some people that can't look at a car for 3 months. And it's not because they think the car is a problem, it's because every time they hear that noise, the feeling comes back. Their brain not only remembers information, it remembers the feeling. And now there's a question of clearance. Not only did the adrenocorticoid drive that imprint, but how long were you in the moment? There's a clearance protein called COMP that determines how quickly you remove the neurochemical to get back to normal. And some people have a much longer duration of clearance. And so not only do they feel it, but they remember everything, right? And that starts to look like PTSD. And there's some people that don't feel it and their clearance is like that. And this starts to look like, why are you so cold? Why don't you care? You know, why won't you help me with this thing? It's not that they don't care. They felt it in the moment just like you. They just can't remember the feeling. And they experience in the moment just like you. They just don't remember the details. So they don't use it as a future decision-making tool. Where some people, it's their primary filter. And
Right.
all of a sudden, those people are more emotionally intelligent. They can bond a little quicker. They can read the room and meet people where they're at, versus I am the logical robot and call me when you need help with solving a problem, but don't lean on my shoulder. Right. And that's just one of many, many neurochemicals we could talk about.
That is fascinating. I mean, yeah, that it sounds like it really plays into it. This would be really helpful for, like we were talking about, love relationships, because if you can know your partner at their neurochemical level and how they're going to react
Yeah.
and see the world.
There hasn't been a single family that we've dealt with when there's multiple people in the room where we were in there for breast cancer or Alzheimer's or just optimized health, where it didn't turn into a counseling session inadvertently, unintentionally, just because it's hard to not go there when we finally have understood how. And it's this aha moment of, oh, that's why. Oh, that's why you do this. Oh, I'm sorry. Now I understand why you say this. Right. And when you understand how your brain perceives, two things happen. You understand your superpower. All of these words like anxiety, depression, addiction are a outcome of your superpower being in the wrong context. If you are that emotionally binding person, you'd be a great clinician, you'd be a great coach, right? Because you can bind and connect, but try and work in the ER where everything reminds you of the person that died yesterday. So context drives a different outcome. And so that's one thing. Learn your superpower and understand what you were wired for. But also, second thing, I said there's two things, is learn your kryptonite. Like, what's the thing that you just can't handle? And what's the thing that causes you to use those words, like depression, anxiety, etc. So this is where we're working with people that, especially younger people that are stuck with anxiety issues, depression issues. They don't have a disease called anxiety or depression. They have a misalignment to superpower plus context, and we teach them what they're wired for, and all of a sudden they feel incredible. Right.
So this leads into kind of, helping us choose a career or kind of a purpose in life.
In a huge way. I like when people ask me who's the most important person to test, I always tell them it's your kids first, because they're the earlier you start with knowing how your body works, the better things are going to be, the less problems you're going to have. So imagine a kid struggling through, do I play football or do I go on track and field? Am I an accountant or am I an artist? We already know. It's hardwired into your genetic code. Are you going to be built like a linebacker where you spend with your child the next 6, 7 years training them and all of a sudden they hit puberty and their body turns into not what you were expecting? Right. And then all that time was, and then they get frustrated, they feel like a failure. Or why don't you just know what they're going to become and put them on the right path? And all of a sudden they feel incredible when they get there. Right.
Yeah,
You
that
know,
saves a whole lot of time and guesswork. And so what are some other ways this can really help with parenting now that we're talking about parenting? Because this seems like an incredible, like you said, we need to do this for children, as soon as
yeah.
possible.
It's in a big way, autism and behavioral development issues, if we speak more clinically, we find that the majority of is what is referred to as autism isn't a disease. It's a misalignment to environment and nutritional inputs,
Mm,
and not necessarily the fault of the parent. They didn't know that this is the way their kid was wired, and there's certain things that they just can't handle. Right.
right.
So that's one. Second thing is, you know, I obviously we talked about the career planning, we talked about the body development. It's also, in terms of quality of sleep and is your child actually recovering? It's also in terms of chronic disease prevention. You got them so young into this process, you can give them their map, their personal GPS, let's call it, for all the problems that could potentially be coming, so that they know all the detours to take, right? And the power and impact of that, of young lady, you are wired for estrogen toxicity, which
Mm,
means that in your menstrual cycle, every month, you convert estrogens into something called 4 or 16 hydroxyestrogen, which are toxic metabolites. Now, if you decide to go on the birth control pill, you're going to be fueling that fire because the birth control pill is just more estrogen, which your body genetically converts into 4 and 16 hydroxyestrogen. And guess what those things do? They cause breast cancer and ovarian cancer, right? Or young lady, horrible menstrual cycle, cramping pain, missing school. Why don't we slow your estrogen metabolism down because you're making this toxic stuff? Or why don't we support your detox pathways to help you get rid of it? Or why don't we help you understand that the shampoo and cosmetics and fragrances that you're using are hormone disrupting and you just can't handle them? Yes, your friend is fine. And yes, your friend uses those same products. And yes, life is unfair, but she's not genetically wired like you.
right.
There's other strengths that you have that she also doesn't have. Right. So that understanding of personalization, and also a big thing that happens, I should tell you, when it comes to kids, is the validation. Kids don't want to listen to their parents. Right.
Hmm.
It's hardwired in personality. When they see empirical data of this is how you're wired, this is why we're doing this, I see over and over again, they're willing to do it. So the things like don't eat like this, don't expose yourself to this, don't overdo the cosmetics. Why? Here's the data. Here's the scientific data that tells you what's going to happen. That moves the needle big time for a child.
Yeah, it's not their parents saying
Yeah.
let's do this anymore. It's no, this is the way you're built. And
Yeah.
that's yeah, you made such a great point about how, somebody, let's say, using more fragrance endocrine disruptor type products in their life.
Yeah.
It could affect somebody extremely and somebody not so extremely. And I think that's where a lot of the confusion in the health and wellness field kind of comes about, because it's like some people are like, no, this is so bad for you. And other people are like, it doesn't affect me. So how can it
It
be
doesn't
bad for
affect
you?
them. Yeah.
So then it creates this big confusion where, some people are like, no, it's not bad. It's probably not bad. It doesn't affect everybody.
Yep. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Whether it's good or bad, problem solution, nothing works for everybody.
Yes, exactly.
There are some things that are bad for everybody. If you're taking in heavy metals, you're going to get sick. How long does it take? Depending on your genetics, for some people faster, for some people slower. So this is the big challenge, is our model and system is designed around averages.
Right.
Is designed around an evidence-based research model, which is put 100 people on this side and 100 people on this side and try and find the average, find the trend. That's going to work really, really well for 3 or 4 out of 10 people. It's going to work not so well for 2 or 3 out of 10 people. And it's actually going to have a problem or adverse effect for another 2 or 3 out of 10 people. But the goal is, let's find the majority. And now we can say this thing works. So that model was good to get us to where we're at. But now that we have better science, why not utilize it? Why not personalize things so that everybody has the answer they need?
Absolutely. I want to touch back real quick on trauma. If somebody does have that kind of gene where they're absorbing trauma or holding on to it more, have you seen any kind of workarounds for that, for those types of people?
Yeah, I think half of the answer, and I've seen this over and over again, is the awareness of how you're wired.
Mm,
Once people start to stop blaming what happened to them versus understanding how they perceive,
right.
and they understand that the thing that feels like a problem is actually their strength, they're emotionally intelligent, it really solves a major part of the problem. Big, big, big time. Because up until then, it was, I'm a victim,
Yeah.
which is probably, it may be true of whatever happened, right? That part's probably true. But the way you feel today, being blamed on whatever happened before, that part might not be true, right? You may feel it more than you potentially could have. There could have been a forgive and forget, right? So that part, supplementation, there's things that upregulate different neurochemical pathways. There's sort of frequency and vibration type work that can regulate neurology, right? You can actually calm the nerves to actually feel the way you want to feel. And then there's trauma work that can be done, but the outcome is so much more rapid. I'm actually talking to a clinic in Orlando right now that does a really amazing work around trauma release, like permanent release.
Mm,
We're kind of putting our two pieces of science together to say, here's the priorities, right? And now we know what treatment they need. So again, removing the trial and error. So I guess long story short is you do not have to be stuck in the trauma loop. If
right.
you know why it happened, you know what to do about it, and you know that it's perception, it's not real, you can break free of it.
That is incredible. And that's such a root cause of a lot of chronic illness with
Yes.
inflammation and the studies they've done on that. So yeah, that is absolutely incredible. And I agree. Just knowing that, knowing, oh, some people don't, this is something genetic, that's why you're holding on to this feeling, that just that knowing helps so
Yep.
much.
In a big way.
Now I want to touch on COVID real quick, because from my experience with COVID, I had it severely. I almost died. I was severely affected, and I'm, not over 65. And it was very confusing to me. And I always was wondering, why some got it so severely, some just had it mild, some were asymptomatic. And this kind of mainstream narrative didn't really make sense about the why. And I've heard you discuss kind of the correlation of genes and severity of COVID. Can you kind of touch on that? And
Yeah,
what?
so there's not one single answer, there's multiple answers, but all of them do point to variability in outcome. The person that was asymptomatic, the person that had a flu, and then somebody like you who got super, super sick. And if you were older, it probably could have been a bigger problem, right?
Yeah.
So COVID is a mitochondrial disease. It's this spike protein embedding itself into your cells. And this is why, so the highest density of mitochondria in your body is in your heart. Number two is your brain. Number three is your eyes. And where are we seeing long haul? It's like heart, brain, eyes, brain fog, blurry vision, heart inflammation, because that's where your mitochondria is. That's what the spike protein is attacking. And so people that have poor mitochondrial function, the same people that I was saying don't recover well from high intensity training, would also suffer far worse when it comes to COVID, right? The ACE gene determines how efficiently COVID actually proliferates and deposits its RNA into your cell. And there's this really crazy study that was done. You may have seen there was an article about Robert Kennedy Jr. saying that Jewish people don't get as sick from COVID, and it was spun into like an anti-Semitic comment. But what he was saying is scientifically true, that if you look at the ACE gene, there's 61 locations on that gene that are markers for severity of COVID. And Jewish people have far fewer of those markers expressing. So it's just harder for them to get sick. You look at certain, like I think the Norwegian people have almost all of them. Uh, African descent have almost all of them. So more likely to get sick. So that's another reason when you look at the actual genetics of the biology of how COVID makes you sick. Then there's hormones. What's this phenomenon of post-vax world where all these young men are getting myocarditis and collapsing,
And the
right?
cancer in children is skyrocketing.
The turbo cancers are just crazy, right? So what we're seeing is, okay, you have, whether it's the virus or the jab, either way, you're getting the spike protein in your body, which causes significant, let's say, abrasion damage type outcome to the cardiovascular system, right? It turns into sandpaper. Now, remember I said earlier, some people have different quality arteries. If you
Yes.
also have the low quality 9p21, then you're much more likely to develop that sandpaper, rough spike protein layered artery, right? So when you're a young man and you're in this adrenaline rush and playing sports, adrenaline is a vasoconstrictor. It constricts the arteries. And if you're already having inflammation, that's a challenge. Now, testosterone is an anti-inflammatory inhibitor. When you have high levels of testosterone, it blocks a lot of the activity that your body would normally start getting into to stop the inflammation. Because think about ancestral context, warrior, battle time, right? You when you get stabbed by a blade, you need that fix and you need to be fighting. It's a different context. Your body doesn't know that you're playing basketball. It thinks that you're in battle.
Right.
So that's why you had this perfect storm of damage, vasoconstriction from adrenaline, anti-inflammatory is blocked, and the inflammation is actually good for healing. Your body thinks that you're stabbed with a sword. And then you have this cardiac arrest, right? So now the same thing was happening, excuse me, from the virus itself.
Mm.
Um, so that's where, and there's more. Like we could spend an hour just talking about this, but there's so many pathways that lead to different outcomes. And the good news is that also tells us how people need to heal, right? We can very rapidly, like the 2 years you spent on long haul, that should have been 2 months. Like it should
Yes.
have been healed quickly, right? So that's another big breakthrough that's come out of this is we know how to help people now.
Right. So I could have done the testing and really pinpointed where I needed support and what kind of, supplements, lifestyle, etc. I needed specifically to heal from that.
Exactly.
That is incredible. So there's no one size fits all to health, as we said, but are there any major, from all this research you've done, kind of baseline actions that would benefit everyone to improve our health?
Yeah, I would say knowing what the threats are that are outside of our awareness in general. The big ones are environmental health.
Mhm.
People are somewhat clueless in terms of what you're breathing every day. The chemicals, pesticides, and it's about total load. It's not like, oh, I breathe in some cleaning chemicals, not a big deal. But that's in the day where you also breathe in 20 other things. So the total load is too much. What's sprayed on our food, what's sprayed in the air, what's sprayed to clean things, your mattress has fire retardants on it, your furniture off gases, like all of this stuff commutatively is too much. The other big one that is making us sick that is outside of our awareness is EMF. Everything around Wi-Fi, cell phone, etc. Your
Exactly.
phone signals the cell phone tower 900 times per minute. That's 15 times per second. So it's as if you made 15 phone calls in 1 second. How is that safe?
Yeah.
The safety data around cell phone usage is from the 1980s. It hasn't been renewed. Excuse me. Now picture a cell phone from the 1980s. It was a brick, low-fi. It wasn't a supercomputer in your pocket, which is what we now have.
Mhm.
The data around cell phone studies was done on military men that were 6 feet plus tall, not on women and children who are using these devices. Excuse me. So all of a sudden, you have a product that is not what was tested 40 years later. You have bandwidth that is a magnitude higher than what was tested. And you have people who were tested. And you wonder why EMF is being called the new cigarette, the silent, constant trickle of threat,
Right.
right? So people have to mitigate EMF neutralizing in the home. There's devices you can get. Turn the Wi-Fi off at night, wear a pendant that blocks it for you, but also heal. You need PEMF, pulse electric magnetic frequency that reverses. So you need to get into certain modalities that used to be foo-foo biohacking or woo-woo, I should say, biohacking, are now like necessities.
Yeah. Yeah, that I've been doing PEMF for a while, and it's such a game changer. Um, Now, would you say that, like we talked about, how this helps with a broad spectrum of different kinds of health issues? Do you think that most health issues can be solved with functional genomics?
I think anything that's chronic in nature doesn't need to happen.
Hmm.
There are genetic conditions
Yeah,
which you cannot stop. They're embedded in your DNA.
right.
That is a tiny fraction of healthcare. In fact, the CDC says that 90% of the $4 trillion healthcare budget is spent on chronic disease management. None of that is meant to happen. That's all caused.
Yeah.
It's all a combination of your genetics plus choices
Yeah,
that
it's
led
interesting.
you.
The budget is growing, and so is the percentage of people getting chronic disease.
Yeah. The American population spends an average of, I think, $14,000 per annum per person. In the EU, it's like 5,000, right? And then people complain about, oh, the EU doesn't allow this chemical, and they don't allow this cosmetic, and they don't allow this bread. Well, their healthcare budget is less than half per person, right? And so, yeah, I do truly believe that when it comes to the pace at which we age, when it comes to how we feel today in terms of energy level, libido, hair, skin, mood, and when it comes to whether we or not we have chronic disease, all of those things are optional. And it's about making choices that are aligned to our genetic code and not fighting our biology.
Yes. Yes. Now, what would the future kind of, how is this going to evolve in your mind, and kind of the work that your company is doing?
Yeah,
What does that look
I
like?
think
How's it going to change healthcare?
right now it's like, hey, I can educate you, inform you, teach you how your body works. You might need some supplements. You might need to remove some things from your lifestyle. What the future I see coming is gene editing, which it's already here, genetic therapeutics, where if you have this bad artery again,
Mhm.
instead of telling you all the supplements you need to take to maintain it, I can give you a gene therapy injection that makes it as if you had the good version. Then your body will start to rebuild this tissue. But then you got to do that every couple of years.
Mm.
So we're already there, by the way. There's already genetic therapy. The vaccine that we just talked about is a genetic therapeutic, right? Just being used for a different, very different modality. So we're there, and we're already starting to see. In fact, I have a call next week with a biotech company who makes genetic therapeutics where we're going to try and work together to build things. So that's what's coming.
That's exciting. Now, I know some people are a little concerned with the whole giving your DNA to a company. Are there concerns around confidentiality with gene testing, in your opinion?
Major concerns. So genetic testing is the only test that you only need to do once. Every other blood work and every else, you keep doing it all your life. And so as a business model, it's not that great.
Hmm.
And so all these genetic testing companies became data selling companies. That was their reoccurring business model. So two things happen there. First of all, the test is not designed for you. It's designed for the data buyer who's paying a lot more money than you're paying for the test. Second is your data is not private. It's part and parcel of the product. It's designed to collect and sell your data. So you're signing all the wrong stuff to give your data away. So I saw that as an opportunity where these guys aren't helping people because they're testing for the wrong stuff, because they're testing for data collection. So if I actually go test for the right stuff, like for example, I told you I'm missing that gut gene, they don't test for that because it's a far more complex thing to test for, right? If I test for the right stuff and I don't sell data and I anonymize it and aggregate it and become an actual healthcare company as opposed to a data company, then we will keep helping people and we will eventually lead because whoever actually provides an outcome is where everybody goes.
Exactly.
right? So, and that's what we did. So I would say in general, if you're getting a genetic test, just assume your data is being collected and sold. Our policy is no, it's aggregated, anonymized. You're not a person in the system, you're a number, and we're not in the business of selling. In fact, we don't even collect the data that pharma wants. So we don't, even if they came to us to buy it, we don't even have what they need. We don't do mass data collection. We do bespoke what you need per case.
Right. It's good to
Right.
know. Now, for everybody listening that wants to get the testing done, can you walk us through how it works, what it entails, and what information we get along with the results?
Yeah. So if you go to my personal website, it's cashconofficial.com, which is also my Instagram handle. So KASHKHAN official.com. You'll see a tab where you can go buy the test. So it'll say DNA test, right? In addition to that, some people need clinical support. So we have these coaching programs that allow people to get in and just derive a lot more value from the DNA. So if somebody needs support, they're welcome to email me also and just connect and whatever they need. If I can't help you personally, I'll get the right person. If it's a medical question where maybe some of our medical team has to answer, I'll get that person for you. And connect with me through Instagram. That's probably the easiest way. So that's how it kind of looks. You order a test, you get shipped a kit, you spit in it, it's saliva, you ship it back. Takes a few weeks to populate, and then you get an email that your report is ready, and you learn. If there's a problem you're trying to solve, if you need clinical support, that's where I advise people to look for coaching, because we definitely know more at the clinical level than what's in the reports. We're just not allowed to say it unless you're a patient.
Right. That makes a
Yeah,
lot of sense. So you'll get your results with a lot of information of kind of breaking down in layman's terms what it
yes,
actually means and what some solutions, if you are kind of missing some.
for sure. And recommendations. Here's some supplements you should take. Here's some supplements you shouldn't take. Here's what you might consider with your food. And there's a bunch of recommendations also.
Beautiful. So you talked about your website. You also have your Instagram, etc. We're going to post out all that below as well. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This was so informative. This is definitely the future of health and wellness and longevity.
It was a pleasure. Thank you. It was really a pleasure to talk to you.
Definitely go check out his book as well, The DNA Way, and his podcast. The links are below to those. And if you like this video, please like and share it with others. This information could really help someone you may know. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to be sure you don't miss out on our future shows. And I will see you all next Wednesday on the next episode of Discovering True Health.